Our future leaders are currently housed within our K-12 education systems. We tend to never think of how our voice plays such a big role in how we represent ourselves. In 1969, our nation was undergoing the Vietnam War, where all national security and practically all governmental actions were heavily overseen by the citizens out of general concern. As a result, 13-year-old Mary Tinker and her brother John Tinker chose to wear black-colored armbands to their school in Des Moines, Iowa, as a form of peaceful protest due to the Vietnam War. The administrators and faculty members at their high school told them they need to remove their armbands. As a result of the students refusing to listen to the demands of the staff members, both students were suspended. These unsuspecting actions by the school staff may have been simple, however sparked one of the greatest First Amendment activism conversations our nation has ever had.
The court case Tinker v. Des Moines School District of 1969 addressed the key congressional issue. To what extent does the First Amendment protect the free speech of students in public schools, and can school officials limit the speech without violating the Constitution?
Back to the story. As a result, the Tinker family filed a lawsuit against the Des Moines School District due to the students' wrongful suspension, claiming that their children's right to free speech was compromised.
This case first began in the Southern District of Iowa courts, who ultimately sided with the school. But after an appeal to the 8th Circuit Court, this case was appealed to the Supreme Court, where a 7-2 majority decision was reached, siding with the Tinker family.
In the Supreme Court, the primary discussion was whether the armbands were considered a distraction to the educational environment or not.
A key quote said by Justice Abe Fortas, one of the judges in this case, was, "It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate."
A concurrent opinion was from Justice Potter Stewart, who wrote that children or students' First Amendment rights are not guaranteed to a full extent.
Additionally, Justin Byron White emphasized the distinction regarding communication via words and communication via actions. This highlights the different forms of First Amendment activism. Additionally, a dissenting opinion was from Justice Hugo Black, who stated that the school was within their right to suspend the students because the armbands pose a distraction to the school being able to carry out their educational duties. On the other hand, Justice John Harlan claimed that the schools should have the ability to maintain order and discipline.
Furthermore, the concept of stare decisis was used by reinforcing that students are able to retain their rights to free speech in schools. Overall, the Supreme Court ruled that the actions of the Tinker students were not a disruption to the school environment and therefore were protected by the First Amendment with a majority decision of 7-2. Tinker v. Des Moines still stands as a strong landmark for youth rights and is one of the most visible forms of the First Amendment activism today.
On to this case, Hazelwood School District v. Kallmeyer of 1988. This case is a similar case to Tinker v. Des Moines regarding the school-based First Amendment activism.
This case involved a school-wide newspaper which a student ran called The Spectrum. In that week's edit of the newspaper, students wrote about topics such as teen pregnancy and divorce, both of them being real issues within their school's local community. The principal of the school disapproved of these articles, removing them from the newspaper, claiming that these topics were harmful and inappropriate.
The students who wrote the articles sued the school district, claiming that the actions of the principal was a violation of their First Amendment rights.
A dissenting opinion was provided by Justice Brennan, who argued that the school newspaper was an established form of student expression, therefore students' writing was constitutional. The majority opinion was provided by Justice White, which established that schools have greater control over school-sponsored publications than over individual student expressions.
All things considered, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the school, unlike the Tinker case, with a 5-3 ratio, stating that the school-managed newspaper is not a public forum, therefore it is not protected by the First Amendment. Both of these cases deal with student-based First Amendment activism in schools, but both outcomes show that the activism is based on the context of the speech. While Tinker protected student expression that was personal and non-disruptive, Hazelwood allowed school officials more control over speech that appears to formally represent the school. This displays the strong relationship between personal protest versus school-sponsored activities.
The next court case is Bethel School District v. Fraser of 1968.
The case began when a student named Matthew Fraser was nominated to give a speech in the school assembly. During his speech, however, he referred to sexual remarks and other remarks that the school administration deemed unacceptable to be said at school. Fraser was immediately punished by school administration, which was when Fraser sued the school for violating his First Amendment rights.
In the Superior Court of Washington, they favored the ruling of Fraser. The court claimed that his speech, despite being inappropriate, was still protected by the First Amendment. Additionally, the decision made by the state court was influenced by the outcome of Tinker v. Des Moines case. The school district then appealed the case to the Supreme Court.
The main question the court had to answer was if Fraser's speech, despite being sexually inappropriate, was protected by the First Amendment, or was the school allowed to discipline the students to maintain an educational environment.
The court has a 7-2 majority decision favoring the school district, ruling that the court is within the right to discipline Fraser. The court did distinguish this from Tinker v. Des Moines by stating the speech was not political nor symbolic, but inappropriate. The court also mentioned that the First Amendment did not protect speech that is offensive to a school environment.
Justice Brennan and Marshall both argued that despite the graphic content in the speech, it was still protected by the First Amendment. They believed that the speech was not harmful or disruptive, so it is still protected by the First Amendment. Justice Powell agreed that the students' rights are limited in a school setting, but emphasized that while students do have the freedom of speech, it is limited in a school setting to maintain the educational environment. Additionally, schools can take certain disciplinary actions to maintain their educational environment and make sure it is a safe learning place for all students.